that's really carrying me through so much is the voice of a friend of mine, Zayda, a friend of mine's grandfather. I want to dedicate this song, Leilui Nishmas, Reb Shmuel B'Tzalel Althaus.
It's so good, right? That's Shlomo Katz doing his Nigun Althaus, and tonight during that intro countdown timer, he just introduced the song, and then we didn't get to really hear the song. So I'll play that at the opening of tomorrow's show, God willing. How's everybody doing? It's great to be with you. Beside the darkness. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late, and I'm mentally switching gears. As I've mentioned before, I'm coaching the Masters and Grandmasters golf team going to the Maccabiah Games in Israel this summer. God willing, nothing gets in the way. The last 2 years, it was canceled, postponed, etc. For COVID. But it is scheduled to go off this year, and so we're just having the team meeting and trying to answer all the questions about travel and dates and ceremonies and scheduling. So now, turn the page, switch the gears. Where am I? Okay, first of all, today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Robert Holtet. In honor of my partner Jessica Jacobson and our daughter Annabelle Jacobson, thank you for all you do, AT. Robert, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen, and thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people. All right, I didn't even welcome people. Who's here today? It's great to be with you on a Monday. Stephen in New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey, Melissa in Great Neck, Nancy, North Carolina, Bella in Florida, Gwen in Michigan, Paul in Chicago, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Heather in Cold, Kansas, Karen in California, Marion in Glendale, Patrice in Utah, Guy in Ohio. What did I say? Guy in Ohio, James in Annapolis, Rebecca in LA. It's jumping on me. John in South Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota. And then over there on the YouTube side, Aoife in Florida. Welcome, everybody. All right. It's a double daf. I was not present yesterday because I was playing in a charity tournament benefiting Chabad of Rancho Mirage in the Palm Springs area. And learn a lot about what they do. Beautiful organization. I mean, every Chabad in every location is doing so much for the community, but especially for children who are otherwise not getting the Jewish education that they need. They're making sure that they get it. And a big Yasher Koach, and may they be strengthened at Chabad Rancho Mirage. All right. We're doing a double daf today, pages 18 and 19 here in Tractate Moed Katan, the 12th volume of the Talmud. We're talking about the laws of chol hamoed, the intermediate days of the festival. We've drawn a link between the laws of the mourner and the laws of chol hamoed. And we've also seen this idea that certain people, that generally you can't, shave or cut your hair or launder your clothes on the intermediate days of the festival. You should have done that before the festival, but certain people didn't have that opportunity because they were in a state of ostracism or they were traveling, various conditions that, so they didn't have that chance to shave, cut their hair, launder, so they can do it on the intermediate days. That led to a discussion of the laws of ostracism, how it differs from excommunication and admonishment among the sages, between the sages, and others. All right, so we continue with this general subject. And now that we've been talking about, certain practices like shaving, haircut, and laundering, the issue came up about trimming one's nails. Can you trim your nails on the intermediate days of the festival? Yes, because nails grow back so fast. Can you trim your nails when you are a mourner? Generally speaking, there's an issue, right, that you couldn't predict that you were going to be a mourner. So it's not that you had that chance before the festival. And we want people to, get into that state of mourning and not be distracted by anything. And as we learned from Aaron and his sons, that they needed to, cut their hair because they are priests serving for them in the tabernacle, later priests in the temple. So as a mourner, they do cut their hair, they do trim their nails, but others don't, right? The regular person in a state of mourning doesn't. We'll talk more about that. So it was related that something happened to Pinchas, the brother of Mar Shmuel. That is to say, we're right near the top of 18a. One of his close relatives died. Shmuel entered to ask him the reason, i.e. to console him. And he saw that Pinchas's nails were long and said to him, "Why do you not cut them?" And Pinchas replied, "If it were your relative who died and you were in mourning, would you treat the matter so lightly and cut your nails?" So we see that there's already a variety of opinions, even among the sages. Can a person trim his nails when he is a mourner? Some were stringent and said, no, you can't. But we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who allowed it, right? Who allowed it. But here we see two sages that disagree on the issue. Shmuel is saying to Pinchas, okay, you've lost a relative, but if you like, you can cut your nails. We're not so stringent that we don't allow that. And Pinchas was almost like, a little bit offended. Like, why are you asking me that? Why are you getting involved? Why are you opening your mouth? And why don't you mind your own business? But of course, Shmuel is a sage and is opening this question with a fellow sage. And that's how this conversation comes about. But at any rate, perhaps because he wasn't thinking, so clearly, and because he's in a state of mourning, Pinchas's answer was quite snappish, let's say, back to Shmuel and saying, well, if it was your relative who died and you were in mourning, would you treat the matter so lightly? I mean, he could have just, talked about the merits of the question and not given this kind of answer. Now, this problem was when Pinchas said to Shmuel, well, if it was your relative who died, why bring up the specter of Shmuel losing a relative? And the sages firmly believe that words have consequences, and particularly the words of the righteous have consequences, right? This goes all the way back to Jacob taking all his sons and wives, etc., and leaving the household of Lavan. And then Lavan chases them. Why did you sneak out? And why did you steal my idols? Jacob is very offended. He says, what do you mean we stole your idols? We didn't steal any idols from you. If you find your idols on anyone in my encampment, that person should die. And tragically, it was his beloved wife Rachel, Lavan's daughter, who had taken the idols from her father, perhaps to wean her own father off idol worship and idolatry. But so he didn't find it on her. So there was no, death penalty imposed per Jacob's words that if the idols are found. But the fact that she had them, our sages elsewhere tie to the fact that Rachel died prematurely, right? She died in childbirth, giving birth to the last of Jacob's 12 sons, Benjamin. But the fact that he had said that, and he's such a tzaddik, such a righteous person, had impact, had consequences. And so here we learn that similar lesson. So Pinchas's words were like an error that proceeds from a ruler. Quoting Ecclesiastes 10:5, as soon as he uttered them, they come true, even though he did not intend them. So shortly after Pinchas made this comment, something happened to Shmuel, and one of his close relatives died. Pinchas, his brother, entered to ask him the reason, in other words, to offer words of comfort. And Shmuel took his nails and cast them in Pinchas's face. And Shmuel then said to him, do you not know the principle that a covenant is made with the lips? In other words, do you not know that what one says influences future events? And that's why you see traditional Jews, observant Jews, will always, if they need to talk about something unpleasant that could happen in the future, they always preface that by saying, God forbid, blah, 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 should happen, right? Meaning they don't even want to raise the specter that it could happen in real life. They're not going to speak lightly about negative things happening in the future, lest their words, assist or enable those events to happen. And this is, as Rabbi Yochanan said, from where is it derived that a covenant is made with the lips, and that one's speech has the power to change events? For it is stated, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go onward, and we will worship, and we will come back to you. Now this is Abraham in the incident of Yakedas Yitzhak. He was told by God, bring your son Yitzhak, the one you love, to offer him, as an elevation offering in a place that I will show you up on that mountain. And eventually Abraham would take Isaac up on the mountain, the binding of Isaac, place him on the altar with the wood, reach his hand for the knife, and he's about to slay his son per God's instruction when the angel from heaven says, stop, Abraham, you don't do anything, don't harm the boy. Now I know that you are a God-fearing man, and because you were willing to sacrifice your son, your descendants shall be a blessing to the whole world, and all the families of the earth will bless themselves by you and your descendants. In that episode, Abraham and Isaac walked to that place along with two other people. Isaac's brother, his older half-brother Ishmael, and Abraham's servant Eliezer. So when they reached the foot of that mountain, Abraham said to Ishmael and Eliezer, stay here with the donkey, and we will return to you. Now, Abraham is thinking, I'm going to take Isaac up there and sacrifice him to God. So Isaac's not going to be coming back down the mountain. And yet the words that came out of his mouth were, we will return to you. And perhaps that's part of the reason, it's involved in the reason that Isaac, it was not taken in that trial and return. I think God never intended for Isaac to be taken, but nevertheless, that Abraham didn't know that, and yet what came out of his mouth was, we will return to you. And so this is part of it, this had influence. This is part of the events that led to Isaac being spared and coming back down the hill with Abraham. Now, with regard to this law about a mourner cutting his nails, so they initially concluded from this incident, that with regard to the nails on the hand, yes, a mourner may cut them, but as for the nails on his foot, his toenails, no, he may not cut them, because long toenails are less repulsive. And Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa said, it was explained to me by Shmuel himself, it is not different if it is the nails on the hand or the nails on the foot. In both cases, trimming the nails for a mourner is permitted. And where is it? Cutting the nails while in mourning. The law follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, as ruled by Shmuel, that a mourner may cut his nails. However, the law also follows the opinion of Rav, and the nails should be cut with one's hand or teeth, but not using a utensil. Once the first 7 days of mourning have passed, but before the 30-day period of the mourning is over, a woman who is preparing for her ritual immersion should ask a non-Jewish woman to cut her nails for her. Some say that another Jewish woman may also cut them on her behalf. However, others disagree and say it is prohibited for another Jewish woman to cut them for her. If you're ever a mourner, don't rely on your memory of this class and this discussion. Talk with your rabbi, look up the laws at that time. We'll talk a little bit more later today about the differences between the 7-day period, the intense 7-day period of mourning, and the next 23 days that fill out the 30-day period of mourning. And there's there's sort of like nuanced areas about this. It's like permitted to cut the nails, but preferable not to, with a utensil, not with a utensil. There's a lot of nuance to this. So in that situation, you should look up the law. Rav Chia Bar Ashi said that Rav said, But with scissors, specifically for nail cutting, it is prohibited, i.e. the mourner should cut his nails in an alternate manner, not with nail clippers. And Rav Shemin bar Abba said, I once stood before Rabbi Yochanan in the study hall during the intermediate days of the festival, and he cut his nails with his teeth and threw them down, as opposed to with a nail clipper. Now we just went from mourning back to chol hamoed. Laws are related, but not the same. But according to this incident of Rabbi Yochanan on chol hamoed, and the Gemara comments learn from this that Rabbi Yochanan has learned from this incident of Rabbi Yochanan 3 laws. Learn from this, 1, that it is permitted to cut one's nails on chol hamoed, the intermediate days of the festival, and 2, learn from it that nails have no prohibition due to the fact that they are repulsive. In other words, there is no prohibition against biting your nails on that basis because they're repulsive. So better to sort of bite your nails and to trim them on the intermediate days of the festival rather than use clippers. Inasmuch as one is prohibited from placing something repulsive in his mouth, this incident teaches that nails do not fall in that category, so it is permitted to bite them when you're making a shinui, when you're cutting them in an abnormal manner because it's the intermediate days. Obviously, better to cut your nails nice and short before the festival starts and don't deal with them during the festival. And also learn from this that it is permitted to throw nails away, that the nail trimmings can be thrown away. Now the Gemara immediately asks, is that so? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa? 3 things were said about nails. One who buries them in the ground is deemed righteous. One who burns them is even better, and he is considered pious. One who merely throws them away is regarded as wicked. And the Gemara explains what is the reason that it is prohibited to throw away nail clippings. And this is prohibited lest a pregnant woman passes over them and miscarry. For the sages had a tradition that it is dangerous for a pregnant woman to walk over fingernails, right? So the issue is if you leave them where you cut them on the floor, and then a pregnant woman might walk over those nail clippings, and that somehow that has the power to lead that woman to miscarry. So one thing is definitely repulsive, wrong, and possibly even dangerous, is that when you trim your nails, you just let them fall where they lie. You know, indoors, outdoors, there hasn't been a distinction. So if there's any possibility that women will walk over your nail clippings, do not leave them on the floor there. Make sure they're disposed of properly. I don't know how many people are, burying or burning. That is considered more pious. But at the very least, make sure that they're, carefully contained in the trash. And I think some people will flush them down the toilet, which is okay too. Right. And the Gemara answers, a woman is not usually found in the study hall, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan was not concerned about throwing his nail clippings there. If you say that sometimes nails are gathered together when the floor is swept and then thrown outside where a pregnant woman may walk over them, this is not a problem. Once their place has changed, the nails themselves change and are no longer harmful. So, okay, another good reason that, you trim your nails, you gather it on a piece of paper or something. Now you pick that up, you move it over, you flush it down the toilet or make sure it carefully goes in the trash. Now you're not causing that danger. And Rav Yehuda said that Rav said a pair of sages from Katan came before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and Mar Zutra taught it without the names of Rav Yehuda and Rav, simply as a pair of sages from Katan came before Rebbe. And they asked him whether or not a mourner is permitted to cut his nails, and he permitted it to them. And had they asked him whether or not a mourner may trim his mustache, he would also have permitted it to them. And Shmuel said they also asked him about trimming a mustache, and he permitted it to them. Avitul, the scribe, said in the name of Rav Papa, a mustache may be trimmed from one corner to the other corner of the mouth. In other words, like very pious Jews don't trim their beard because they just let the beard grow. There's a teaching elsewhere that the beauty of the face is in the beard. But the mustache, you don't trim that. It's going to make it very difficult to eat. Now, which sects of Jews, because obviously there's Orthodox Jews that shave, right? And there's Orthodox Jews that grow beards. That discussion is for another day. That's beyond the scope of today. But the mustache may be trimmed by anybody because it gets in the way of eating. Rabbi Ami said one may trim only the portion of the mustache that interferes with normal eating, but one may not trim the mustache for beautification. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzhak said, for me, my entire mustache is considered like a mustache that interferes with normal eating, as I am particularly sensitive, and so I may trim my mustache. Having mentioned Avital the scribe, the Gemara records two very colorful statements of his. And Avitul the scribe said in the name of Rav Papa, the Pharaoh who lived in the days of Moses was a cubit tall, right? 18 inches, very short man. And his beard was a cubit long. All right, so he's a cubit tall and his beard is a cubit long. Now we got a kind of a gnome type of figure. And his penis was a cubit and a span. His cubit is longer than his beard and is taller than he is. A cubit and the distance between the thumb and the little finger in length in order to fulfill what is stated, Daniel 4:14, and he sets up over it the lowest of men, which teaches that Pharaoh was extremely short and lowly, spiritually and physically. Avitul the scribe also said in the name of Rav Papa, the Pharaoh who lived in the days of Moses, right? The Pharaoh who, enslaved the Jews and did not want to let them go, was a sorcerer, an amgushi, as it is stated. That's a Persian word. As it is stated, behold, he goes out to the water. Exodus 7:15. Pharaoh would regularly go out to water in order to engage in witchcraft. Now we move on from that, just a little digression on those statements of Avitul. The Mishna taught, and these people may launder their clothes on the intermediate days of a festival. One who comes from a country overseas, and Rav Ashi said that Rabbi Yochanan said anyone who has only one shirt is permitted to launder it on the intermediate days of the festival. And then there's because we're doing 2 pages today, I'm going to just skip a few paragraphs. Basically, we're going to complete our discussion here of Mishnah number 1 here of chapter 3. With a little bit more discussion about a person who has only one shirt and whether he may launder it on the intermediate days of the festival. But the general principle is we don't do laundry on the intermediate days of the festival unless there's a very compelling reason to do laundry. Now we come to Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 3, and we're on the B side of page 18. And these are the documents that may be written on the intermediate days of a festival, right? So this is another type of activity. In chapter 1, we talked about like regular work, whether a person can do his work or not. And that general principle was to prevent a financial loss, a significant financial loss, as long as it didn't require excessive exertion. Other types of work were permitted for the public good or for the needs of the festival. In later chapters, we're talking about activities that don't constitute necessarily like, my career, my profession type of work, but activities that would be prohibited on Shabbos, prohibited on the festival, and are they going to be permitted or not on these intermediate days? So generally speaking, we would want to avoid writing on the intermediate days, but some documents may be written. Right? And let's just look, before even I go into the Mishnah, what is the law? Where did the law end up on this? Writing during the intermediate days of a festival. During the intermediate days of the festival, it is permitted to write documents of betrothal, documents of stipulation, bills of divorce, receipts for repayment of debt, wills, gift documents. We'll get into a little bit more of these. But so this general idea is, okay, like important situations that require documenting, that's going to be possible. Some say that it's permitted to write a marriage document, and some say that it is prohibited. Some permit one to write down novel ideas that he has about Torah, lest he forget them. Some permit the writing of greeting letters based on the Jerusalem Talmud, and others prohibit it. In many places, it is customary to be stringent. Some authorities say that writing is permitted as long as it is not the script used for writing Torah scrolls, because ordinary script is not considered to be the work of an expert. Those who write in an ordinary manner during the intermediate days of the festival do so based on this opinion. Some require that each letter be written in an unusual manner. Right? So we see that even today, there's going to be some division about the opinions of this, whether you should be writing on the intermediate days of festivals. There is a lenient opinion that people can follow. If possible, avoid it, right? So that you can kind of retain that festive atmosphere and not get involved in the mundane type of living that we do the rest of the year. So, Mishnah number 2. And these are the documents that may be written in the intermediate days of a festival. Documents of the betrothal of wives, right? Getting engaged. That was a more formal thing, the betrothal, through which bridegrooms betroth their brides. Bills of divorce. So you can get divorced. You can write the get on chol hamoed. Receipts for the repayment of debts. Wills. Deeds of gift. A pros bull. Which was, because Jews cannot lend to other Jews at interest, right? And because debts also get canceled in the Jubilee and even in Shemitah, certain debts can be canceled. So therefore, there was a document. So what was the result of that? That poor people who needed to take out loans couldn't get a loan if it was close to the 7th year of the Shemitah cycle, because the debt would be canceled in the 7th year. So no lender wanted to lend to them. But then there was an alternative arrangement made where the lender could assign the debt, the value of the money that's owed to him. He could assign that to the court. And then debts to the court don't get canceled in the Shemitah year. So this kind of legal arrangement, which would allow poor people to get loans even in the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, it actually benefited them. And those kinds of documents could be written chol hamoed. And also letters of sustenance, which were drawn up when one accepted upon himself to maintain another person, for example, his stepdaughter. And the list continues. Documents of the ritual through which the brother-in-law frees the yavama of her levirate bonds. When a man dies, he's married, but he hasn't had children, and he has a brother, and then that brother, is obligated to marry the widow, and the first child will accrue to the merit of the dead brother. But if they don't want to marry each other, the widow and the younger brother, they can free each other, and it takes a document to do that through the ceremony of chalitza. That can be done on chol hamoed. Documents in which the court records the refusal of a girl upon reaching majority to remain married to the man to whom her mother or brothers married her when she was a minor after the death of her father. Documents of arbitration in which the court summarizes a conflict that had been resolved through arbitration, court rulings, and the official correspondence of the ruling authorities. And what we see, these are all important documents that set down what happened in very important dealings, transactions, ceremonies, court proceedings, etc., where delaying until after the festival could cause significant loss, could cause real problems, and you wouldn't want. So they don't want to delay these things. They have to be done chol hamoed. And then once you've done it, you don't want to delay the writing down, to be several days after, when you betrothed the wife or when you divorced or whatever. The writing has to be done at the same time as these sort of, contracts are put in place or these relationships are adjusted. The writing has to be recorded at the same time. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara. Shmuel said it is permitted to betroth a woman on chol hamoed, lest another come and betroth her first. And the Gemara asks, well, let us say that the Mishnah supports Shmuel, who said, and these are the documents that may be drawn up on the intermediate days of a festival, and that includes documents of betrothal. And what, is the Mishnah not referring to actual documents of betrothal through which one would actually betroth a woman? And the Gemara says, no, the Mishnah is referring to documents of stipulation, recording the amounts that the parents agree to pay as the dowry to their respective son or daughter in accordance, for their respective son or daughter in accordance with what Rav Giddel said that Rav said. What did they say? Rav Giddel said that Rav said, When two families negotiate the terms of marriage for their respective children, and one side says to the other, how much do you give to your son as a dowry? And the second side says, I give such and such amount. How much do you give to your daughter? And the first side responds, such and such an amount. Then, once the bride and groom arose and pronounced the betrothal formula, then all these obligations are acquired and binding. And these are among the things that are acquired through words alone. In other words, there is no need to perform an additional act of acquisition, a kinyan, in order to confirm the agreement. And the Mishnah is referring to a document that records such an agreement. Normally, you want to sell a horse, I want to buy a horse, right? We agree on a purchase price. I'm going to pay you $1,000 for your horse, and you say, I accept, I will take $1,000 for my horse. Has that transaction been finalized? No. What if I give you the money? Okay, here's the $1,000. Has the transaction been finalized? No, because payment of money is not one of the actions that is a valid kinyan for acquiring something. It's when I take the reins of the horse and move them a certain amount, even a small amount, that's when that transaction has been finalized. Those kinds of law we will study at length when we get into later tractates. But for here, what they're saying is when parents agree to a dowry, and then the prospective bride and groom say, well, we're going to rely on the fact that your parents and my parents said this is how much dowry they're going to pay, and okay, we are betrothed. We are now engaged. Right? They're relying on the statement of the dowry. And so even though no money changed hands, no handkerchief was lifted, which is another kind of kinyan, no other action was taken than words, in that situation, the words are binding, and you can see why that would be necessary. And the Gemara asks, well, let us say that the following Mishnah supports Shmuel. One may not marry a woman on the intermediate days of a festival, neither a virgin nor a widow, nor may one of them perform levirate marriage with his sister-in-law if his brother died childless, because that would be a joyous occasion for him. And this statement implies that it is only marrying that is prohibited, but betrothing is permitted, right? And why don't we do weddings during the festival? Because wedding is its own kind of rejoicing. We don't want to mix the rejoicing of a wedding with the rejoicing of the festival. But a betrothal, even though it's a happy thing, doesn't rise to the level of a wedding, and it is permitted to do that, chol hamoed. Skipping a couple paragraphs, because we have a lot to cover, the Gemara raises a question about the ruling itself, and did Shmuel actually say that we are concerned that perhaps another man will come and betroth the woman first, right? There could be a significant loss if we don't do this now. But didn't Rav Yehuda say that Shmuel said every day a divine voice issues forth and says, the daughter of so-and-so is destined to be the wife of so-and-so, the field of so-and-so will belong to so-and-so. If this is the case, why should one be concerned lest another one betroth her first? It is predestined that he will marry his designated mate. Why are we allowing this couple to get betrothed on the intermediate days of the festival if God has arranged who's going to end up with who is who's beshert, who is whose soulmate, that they're going to end up together? Why not what's the hurry? Let them wait until after the festival to do the betrothal. And rather, Shmuel's statement should be understood as follows. Perhaps another man will come and betroth her first by means of praying for divine mercy. In other words, Shmuel is concerned that the rival, right, this guy and this girl want to get engaged, right? They've agreed to get engaged. They should get engaged. They should have that betrothal ceremony, even if it's chol hamoed. Shmuel is saying because if they don't, if a few days pass, somebody else could step in. Well, if the couple's predestined by God, who's going to step in? Well, it could be that some other guy who'd rather marry this girl before she marries this guy, and the other guy prays to God and says, release her from that, mistake marriage that she shouldn't be in so that she's be allowed to marry me. And maybe heaven will accept that prayer. Right? Shmuel is concerned that the rival may beseech God to cancel the decree of the divine voice, and therefore the first man needs to hurry and betroth the woman before the other one has had a chance to pray that he should take her from the first guy. And this is like an incident in which Rava heard a certain man asking for mercy, i.e. praying, who said, "Grant me so-and-so as a wife." And Rava said to him, "Do not pray and ask for mercy in this way. If she is fit for you, then it has been decreed that she will be your wife. She will not go away from you. And if she is not destined to be your wife, you will come to deny the Lord when you see that your prayer is not answered." After the man married this woman, right? So he was praying for her and it actually worked out. Rava heard him praying, on a later date, "Please either let me die before her or her before me." And he was speaking about himself and his wife because he had grown to hate her so much. And Rava said to him, "Did I not say to you not to pray for this matter?" So interesting. Certainly permitted to pray if you're single that, you should meet your beshert, right? That you should meet the person that's intended for you and that you'll, go to the chuppah and get married and create a family. Or if you're older, you're not in the time of having children, whatever. You could certainly pray that you meet the person who's right for you so that you should get married. But according to this, you shouldn't pray that somebody that you know and maybe isn't into you or isn't available to you, that person you should end up with. That's not an appropriate subject for prayer. And Rav said, in the name of Rabbi Reuven ben Isterobli, as follows: from the Torah and from the prophets and from the writings, it implies that the decree that a specific woman is destined to be married to a specific man is from God. God arranges all the matches, right? Not we. From where is this derived? Well, we see it in the Torah. Then Lavan and Bethuel answered and said, "The thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak to you either bad or good." That's when Abraham's servant Eliezer went to bring a wife home for Isaac, and he met Rivka. And, he said, "Let God show me a sign who is the right woman." And there was a whole story and a sign. And then even her brother and her father agreed. Well, the thing is from God. Who are we to interfere with this? And from the prophets, we see, as it is written, Judges 14:4, "But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord." And in the writings portion of the Bible, as it is written in Proverbs 19:14, "House and riches are the inheritance of fathers, but a prudent woman is from the Lord." Right? So your match, the person you're destined to marry, that comes from God. Apropos a teaching of Rabbi Reuven ben Isterobli, the Gemara states that Rav said in the name of Rabbi Reuven ben Isterobli, and some say that it was Torah Baraisa that Rabbi Reuven ben Isterobli said, "A man is suspected of having done something wrong only if he has indeed done so." What? Did he just say that anybody who's suspected of wrongdoing, it must be because he was engaged in wrongdoing? And if he did not do it completely, then probably he did it partly. And if he did not do it even partly, then probably he thought in his heart to do it. And if he did not even think to himself to do it, then certainly he saw others doing it and was happy. Suspicions do not arbitrarily arise about a person. Therefore, it certainly has some basis for him. If you come to have your reputation besmirched, it must be that there's something a little bit wrong with you. Rabbi Yaakov raised an objection. Does the verse not say, "And the children of Israel fabricated matters that were not right against the Lord their God," which indicates that it is possible to make up stories about someone else even though they are entirely baseless. And the Gemara answers, well, there they did it in order to anger God, but they did not actually think that what they were saying was true. Well, coming here a challenge from a different source. The verse states, "And they were jealous of Moses in the camp, of Aaron, the Lord's Holy One," right? The people were stirring up rumors, like Korach was, stirring up rumors against Moses and Aaron. Were Moses and Aaron to blame? Had they behaved in any inappropriate way? And Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak said, this verse teaches that every man warned his wife not to seclude herself with Moses because he was jealous. The man was jealous of Moses. And this implies that every man thought that his wife had secluded herself with Moses and sinned, although this was certainly not the case. Moses wasn't going around sleeping with other men's wives. And this demonstrates that it is possible, of course it is possible, to suspect an absolutely innocent person. And the Gemara answers, well, they did that out of hatred for Moses. They did not actually suspect him of wrongdoing. Instead, their goal was to degrade him by leveling these false accusations against him. Okay, people might have leveled false accusations against him, but the ones who heard those accusations now might start to wonder. Now, the Gemara raises another challenge based on yet another source. Come and hear what Rabbi Yosef said. May my portion in the future world be with one who is suspected of a certain wrongdoing but is innocent, as the pain that such a person experiences atones for his sins. This statement also appears to imply that it is possible to suspect an absolutely innocent person. And Rav Papa said, they suspected me of certain wrongdoing, but I was not guilty. The Gemara answers, it's not difficult. This is referring to a rumor that stops, and therefore it is possible that it is groundless, whereas that is referring to a rumor that does not stop. And in that case, there must be some factual basis for the suspicion. And the Gemara asked to be considered a rumor that does not stop. For how long must it persist? And Abaye said, my nurse told me, local gossip lasts for a day and a half, and then it is deemed to be a rumor that does not stop. So more than a day and a half, there must be some basis to it. And the Gemara comments, this applies only if the rumor did not stop in between during the day and a half. But if it stopped in between, then we have no problem with it, and it is not a persistent rumor. And if the rumor stopped in between, we said that it is considered baseless only if it stopped of its own accord and not out of fear, i.e. because the suspect is violent and therefore people are afraid to speak badly about him. But if the rumor stopped out of fear, then his dispensation does not apply. And it is still assumed that there must be some basis to the rumor. And we said that a rumor that stopped is assumed to be baseless only if it did not arise again. But if it arose again, then this does not apply. And we said that a rumor that does not stop must be taken seriously only if the slandered person has no enemies. But if he has known enemies, then it can be assumed that it was the enemies who disseminated the rumor and there's no truth to it. That's the end of our discussion of Mishnah number 2. Now listen, folks. It's a huge, massively important teaching that Nina has taught about many times from the Chofetz Chaim, that we don't listen to Lashon Hara. We don't listen to gossip about people. That's how rumors get started. And if we have this teaching that some could quote or misquote parts of this, that, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. If we've heard something, it must be that there's some kind of basis to it. But no, we don't listen to that, right? So, if you're evaluating whether to, hire somebody as a babysitter for your kids, you have to take any information that you get very seriously and investigate properly. But don't take that discussion as some kind of a blanket permission to assume that rumors that make someone look bad, might have some truth to it. In fact, who doesn't have enemies in this world? Everybody, back then, everyone lived in small towns and kind of like knew everybody that was involved in someone's life. But today, even your closest friends, you don't know everybody who knows him. It's very possible that he has enemies out there. And so anything, suspicions about your friend that you hear, rumors that you hear about a person, the default position should be to disbelieve it, and don't even listen to it because it's Lashon Hara. All right, Mishnah number 3. One may not write bills of debt on the intermediate days of a festival, but if the lender does not trust the borrower and he is concerned that the borrower will later deny the loan, or if the scribe has nothing to eat, then he may write a bill of debt during the festival week, right? Either to give work to the scribe so that he can enjoy the festival, or because the one who's borrowing the money needs it, you want to lend him the money so that he can enjoy the festival. You're afraid he won't repay. So in that situation, you can write the promissory note. One may not write Torah scrolls, tefillin, or mezuzahs on chol hamoed, the intermediate days, nor may one correct a single letter, even in the Torah scroll of Ezra, which was kept in the temple and upon which all the Jewish communities relied. And Rabbi Yehuda says one may write tefillin and mezuzahs for himself on the intermediate days of the festival if he needs them. And one may spin techeles, the sky blue wool, for his ritual fringes, his tzitzis on his thigh, but not in the ordinary manner with a spindle, as this procedure must be performed in an altered manner on the intermediate days of the festival. Now we're on page 19a. And, in terms of whether you can write mezuzahs for yourself or create tefillin, or, create, make fringes for your clothes, make tzitzis. There's just a short commentary, but we're really low on time. So we're going to go right to, it's a very short Gemara. Now we're skipping to Mishnah number 4. Mishnah 4. One who buries his deceased relative 3 days before a festival, Pesach, Shavuos, or Sukkot, has the decree of the 7-day period of mourning, the shiva, nullified for him by the festival. He is not required to complete the shiva. He doesn't sit shiva during the festival, and he doesn't have to come back around and complete the missing days after the festival. If one buries his deceased relative 8 days before the pilgrimage festival, then the decree of 30 days is also nullified for him. The restrictions that ordinarily apply during the shloshim, the 30-day period of mourning, no longer apply after the festival. This is because the sages set a principle with regard to this issue. Shabbos counts as one of the days of mourning. The shiva is a week long. Shabbos has got to be at least one, is going to land on at least one of the, it's a 7-day, so one of those days is going to be Shabbos, and Shabbos counts as one of the days of mourning, although one may not mourn on it, and it does not interrupt the mourning period, which continues after Shabbos. The pilgrimage festivals, on the other hand, interrupt the mourning period, so that if one began the shiva before such a festival, then the mourning period is canceled by the festival. They do not, however, count. If one did not begin the mourning before the festival of his relative, or if his relative died during the festival, then he is required to complete his mourning period after the festival, as the days of the festival do not count toward the requisite days of mourning, right? So if somebody dies during the festival, you start the shiva after the festival. Right? So Shabbos counts and it does not interrupt. The halacha, Shabbos is counted as one of the days of mourning, although the restrictions of mourning do not apply. During it, it does not interrupt the mourning period. Festivals do interrupt. If one began mourning before a festival, the festival interrupts his mourning. It does not continue mourning on the conclusion of the festival. However, if he did not begin observing mourning practices before the festival, then the days of the festival are not counted toward his mourning period, and he must observe the mourning in its entirety afterward. In the diaspora, outside of Israel, where 2 festival days are observed, the last day of the festival is counted as one of the 7 days of mourning, so only 6 more days are observed, right? Because why do we have a 2-day holiday at the end of Sukkot or at the end of Passover outside of Israel? Because of uncertainty, and we're lenient in matters of mourning, so that first day, which is still the festival, is going to count toward the Shiva. Rabbi Eliezer says, from the time that the temple was destroyed, Shavuos is like Shabbos, because nowadays the days following Shavuos are not treated like festival days. When the temple stood, many of the festival's offerings that could not be sacrificed on Shavuos itself would be sacrificed during the 6 days following the festival. Nowadays, however, when there's no temple, when offerings are no longer sacrificed, Shavuos lasts for only 1 day in Israel and 2 days outside of Israel, and therefore it is treated like Shabbos with regard to mourning. It counts as one of the days of mourning, but does not interrupt the period of mourning. Shavuos is like Shabbos. Rabban Gamliel says, even Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are considered like the pilgrimage festivals, in that they interrupt the mourning period, but are not counted toward the days of mourning. And the rabbis say the law is neither in accordance with the statement of Rabban Gamliel, nor in accordance with the statement of the rabbis. Rather, with regard to mourning, Shavuos is treated like other pilgrimage festivals, whereas Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are treated like Shabbos. What do we have here? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, with regard to mourning, the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Gamliel, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur have the same status as the other festivals with regard to mourning. The Gemara, with regard to the Mishna's statement that the 7 and 30-day periods of mourning are nullified, Rav said the decree, meaning the main prohibitions of the period, was nullified, but the days of mourning themselves were not nullified. Instead, these periods of mourning remained to some degree. And so said Rav Huna, the decree was nullified, but the days of mourning themselves were not nullified. And Rav Shesha said even the days of mourning were also nullified. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that the days themselves were not nullified according to that opinion? The Gemara explains, it is so that if one observed 8 days of mourning before the festival, so that the prohibition against hair cutting was nullified before the festival, but for whatever reason he did not cut his hair on the eve of the festival, he is prohibited from cutting his hair after the festival until the end of the 30-day period of mourning. In other words, the mourning period was not entirely nullified since it did not take advantage of the allowance to cut his hair before the festival. He must observe the prohibitions applying during the 30-day period of mourning after the festival. All right, let's just talk for a second about what is the difference between the 7-day period of mourning and the 30-day, right? So the 7-day, the shiva. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Okay, so during the intense period of mourning, so you can cut your nails. We discussed that. But you don't study Torah. You don't wear leather shoes. There's a whole bunch. You don't leave the house. You don't go to work, except on Shabbos. You have to sit in those low chairs. You don't greet people. So there are a bunch of laws like that are the requirements of shiva. Okay? So then, after the first 7 days are over, now we count to the shloshim. Which is the first 30 days. So the first 7 days are part of that 30 days. So after the 7-day shiva period of intense mourning, we have 23 more days of pseudo mourning, right? Like some restrictions are eased, so it's not quite as much. And what does that mean? So you may leave the house, you may change clothes, you may greet others, you can sit in regular chairs, you can wear leather shoes, you can work, you can study Torah, you can have marital relations, you can attend a bris or a bar mitzvah or a CU. So those are the things you can't do during the first 7 days, you can do during the next 23 days. But you still don't listen to music, you don't attend a concert, you don't go on pleasure trips. If you're going to go to a wedding, you go in, you give congratulations to the parents and the bride and groom, but you don't stay and dance at the wedding. And generally speaking, you avoid activities that are not consistent with that spirit of mourning that you're still in during that 30-day period. Okay, so now let's just read a little bit more, and then I'm almost done for what I'm going to cover today. So if you've got questions or comments, get them in now. Okay, we read that. But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, in the case of one who buries his dead relative 3 days before a pilgrimage festival, the decree of the 7-day mourning is nullified for him. If one buries his dead relative, and now we're on the B side of page 19. If one buries his dead relative 8 days before a festival, the decree of 30 days is nullified for him, and therefore he may cut his hair on the eve of the festival. If, however, he did not cut his hair before the festival, he is prohibited from cutting his hair after the festival until the end of the 30-day period. Again, a lot of different opinions here, a lot of nuance to this. God forbid you lose someone, you're a mourner, you have to research the laws at that time. You're probably going to have a rabbi in your life at that time to help you with the funeral and the shiva and everything. And that rabbi will be expert in these laws of mourning and what is prohibited and what is permitted and what is obligated. Abba Shaul says, even if he failed to cut his hair on the eve of the festival, he is permitted to cut his hair after the festival, for just as his observance of the mitzvah of 3 days of mourning prior to the festival cancels the decree of the 7-day period, and so if the deceased was buried 3 days before the festival, the mourner is no longer required to continue this period of mourning after the festival, so too his observance of the mitzvah of the 7 days of mourning before the festival cancels the decree of the 30-day period of mourning. I'm done. I'm going to go to questions and comments. But as I said, lots of nuance to those laws. Much literature and articles available. Chabad.org has a bunch of articles on this subject. So God forbid you're ever in that situation. ample information available for your situation, especially, if a death should occur just before or during a festival. Okay, let's go to questions and comments on pages 18 and 19 here in Tractate Moed Katan. All right. And we sort of cut out early on the B side of page 19. Tomorrow, I will be covering, with God's help, some of this material that's on the B side of page 19 in addition to page 20. Bill, perhaps even Abraham's slip of the tongue when he seemed to say we, like, did he realize what he was saying, that he and Isaac would return? Says Bill, perhaps even Abraham's slip of we will return was a moment of prophecy, as if God put the word we on his lips to, as it were, tip God's hand. Abraham, of course, is too distraught to have noticed, but surely Ishmael, Eliezer, and certainly Isaac would have taken heart that Abraham said it. Now, when you say taken heart, it's like the other three knew why they were going up the mountain. But I don't think they did, right? I don't think they did. Isaac doesn't know why he's going up that mountain until they've already left Ishmael and Eliezer behind, right? And that's when Isaac says to his father, well, here's the fire, here's the knife, here's the wood, but where's the lamb for the offering? And Abraham says, well, God will see to the lamb for himself. And our sages teach that answer did inform Isaac that Isaac would be the lamb, as it were. And at that point, he knew what was going on and proceeded anyway of one mind with Abraham. But the assumption is that Ishmael and Eliezer did not know at the time that they were being left behind. But I like what you're saying, Bill, that it was a kind of moment of prophecy, even unknowing prophecy by Abraham. I like that a lot. Nina is telling me, fun fact, at the mikveh, there's a sign that says, pregnant women also use the mikveh. Please don't leave nail clippings on the floor. And she says, I never understood it until now. Why is this so relevant, right? Because in terms of the laws of family purity, right? So normally speaking, Jewish husband and wife, she starts having her period. The husband and wife are prohibited to touch each other. Her period ends. She counts 7 days without, bleeding, spotting, etc. Now she's going to go immerse in the mikveh, and then when she returns that night, that's the big date night for the husband and wife. They've been prohibited to touch each other at all for, almost even as much as 2 weeks. So, it's beautiful, rekindling the fire of the relationship when she comes home. But the point here is that before the woman immerses in the mikveh on that night, she has to prepare for the mikveh. And that is a lengthy process that includes trimming one's nails, removing all jewelry, being utterly clean, so that there should be no interposition of anything, any dirt, any smudge, any jewelry, nothing between her and the waters of the mikveh. And part of that is trimming the nails. So since women are always trimming their nails, before going in the mikveh, and they might be doing it at the facility where the mikveh is. Some really beautiful mikvehs are all decked out like a spa. And Nina says there's a sign there. Make sure that you don't leave those nail trimmings on the floor, because pregnant women use the mikveh too, which is interesting. But so you got to be careful, right? Now you could just say, wow, this is really old-fashioned superstition that somehow nail trimmings lead to women miscarrying. But I would not be a skeptic in the face of anything that the sages say, unless I had, reason from another sage to be skeptical. So let's just take that extra caution on behalf of pregnant women everywhere, that we trim our nails and we carefully dispose of our nail trimmings. If nothing else, nobody else needs to walk by and see your disgusting nail trimmings on the floor or wherever. We should all be, hygienic and refined people when it comes to nail trimmings. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Tuesday, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Some of the material that we didn't cover on 19 at the end of 19b and page 20. Have a